Okay, today I'm going to install an SSD hard drive in place of my DVD super drive in an iMac 9.1 24-inch, which is an early 2009 release. So there are other videos on this. I figured I'd shoot this to give you a real customer installation process. The other thing I'm going to do is talk about how to make this into a Fusion drive, which is kind of nice because you don't have to partition your apps to go on the solid state and your user files to go on the spinning drive. You can kind of just let the OS system take care of that. That requires, I think, 10.8.4 and higher, or maybe it's 10.8.2. But you're going to need at least Mountain Lion, and Mavericks will handle it. So a couple things before we get started here. I got this idea from somebody else. I just took an egg crate, made myself a little place for the screws. It's not really necessary. Below that is a USB drive. This I can boot off of and install Mavericks. I made sure this is going to work before I started this process, because when I make the Fusion drive I'm going to wipe out all the contents and I don't think I'll have a recovery partition anymore. So moving over here a little bit, got a standard OWC data doubler bracket, the SATA cable that will allow me to use the DVD plug or cable and go to the solid state hard drive. I bought a 3G OWC drive, got some suction cups from Home Depot. It's nice to have one of these toolkits. The data doubler comes with a small one. It does not have the same assortment of tools. I think if you're going to do this very often or work on Macs of any type, this is not a bad thing to have. So let's get started here. The first thing we're going to do is just remove the screw from the memory door. I think this is basically required so you can get the bezel off later. So I pulled the glass off. The next thing that I did is I took a T8 driver right here and went around and took all these screws out. Now what I did is I used my little egg crate here to sort these things. There are 3 lengths of screws. I can probably remember it, but just in case I marked them. So basically anything that was yellow here was kind of a medium screw. So these on the side were all mediums. These 2 on the bottom are pretty easy, they're extremely long. All the others were short screws across the top. One thing to note about this Mac, it has been a part for Apple Care repair before, so hopefully those guys put the screws back in the right place. So the next thing I'm going to try to do is lift this bezel off. Now I know there's a microphone connector in the top, so we have to be careful getting it off. I'm going to spin this around a little bit. See if I can. There it goes. So we're going to do this. And there's a little connector right here. It's got a little bit of slack. I'm going to try to undo it right now without getting my fingers on the LCD. Undone. I'm going to slide this back just a little bit and take it out of the way. Okay, so now I'm going to put the iMac back in its original position. Okay, the next step was to unplug this connector. So that's a T6, which I should have over here in my arsenal. Yep, here's the T6. One thing I really like about these OWC screwdrivers is they have this little ability to, the bearing on the top, to allow you to spin it. So that's my connector. connector. The other thing, there's some T10s here that are holding the LCD. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's a T8. Yep. I can tell this has been apart from AppleCare because those were pretty tight. My last computer, they were not nearly as tight. So I've got a little bin called LCD screws. That one was pretty easy. And I believe all these are going to be the same length, but I'll kind of keep an eye on that as they come out. So now there's this little connector here. All you're supposed to have to do is kind of grab this. It's got some tape on it. Give it a little wiggle and it should come out. That wasn't too bad. Then I'm going to lift the LCD up. I'm going to try to keep from touching it. There's supposed to be a little temp sensor cable under here. So these things are always heavier than they look. I see, no, I see the temp sensor. I don't see where it's connected yet. Here it is. So it's just back a little bit. It's a little bit dark in here. I just grabbed my fingernail. It came right out. There's like a little edge you can get. Now the next thing is there is a cable that goes between, I'll call it the video card and the LCD, but you can unplug either end. From what I can understand, the end that's connected to the LCD is probably the better option because I've read some reviews where people had a very difficult time getting the other one back on. So they tell you there's some mylar tape up under here, and this thing still feels like it's connected a little bit. I just want to make sure it's not. I did. I left a screw in here. Which is right here. Okay, it's a little bit easier to lift up now. Okay, so there's a piece of mylar tape. You're supposed to kind of peel this back so you can see the connector. And then it looks like it comes off fairly easily. So we'll test that and see. Of course, in other people's videos, things always come right off. It's not so bad. Just got to pull it evenly. So I've got the connector off. I'm going to lift this away slowly just in case I screwed up and didn't disconnect something. Looks good. I'm going to store this. Hopefully not get any fingerprints on it. Okay, so now my next step here is I'm going to pull the DVD drive out. What's interesting, this Mac has always had higher fan speed than I think it should. Not extremely high, but just higher than my others. So I was going to inspect this temp sensor right here. It looks like it's intact. Looks like it's connected fine. So that should be okay. So next thing I'm going to do is try to find the right size Torx head for this, which is a 10. So I'm going for the DVD drive right now. And I've got a little thing labeled DVD there. It looks like there is a second screw right here. There's also a connector on the back. I'm just going to take a very small flathead screwdriver and I'm just going to gently nudge this thing evenly. Try to pop it out. So I'm just working it side to side a little bit. Okay, that's loose. Hopefully this will lift up. It does. And there's a little bit of tape here on the edge that came right up. No problem. And then the temp sensor is back here. So I can either untape it from here, and this, I swear this, look, I don't know who did this. Maybe it was done at the Apple Care store or during Apple Care repair. I don't know. I don't know if it's easier to disconnect this thing or just go ahead and try to do it here in place. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set this gently down here, peel up this little piece of tape that holds the wire in place. And then this is another one of those connectors that's got a little edge if you can get up under it. So where's my flathead? So rather than use my fingernail, I'm just going to unplug this. Now one thing I'm going to do is remember how these go. And it looks like on this one the white is to my left. So I'm just going to remember that when I stick it back in, there won't be any question. So I'm kind of using a combination of pulling that, my hands on the wire and using the screwdriver. So white's on the left. So we've got this undone. We're going to have to take this piece of foam off and this temp sensor. I'm going to stick it back on the SSD drive. The other part's pretty straightforward. There are 2 screws here, 2 screws here. I'm going to pull those out. Okay. Then I'm going to mount the OWC drive in the data doubler bracket. So that's pretty easy. Let's go ahead and mount the drive first. So in this bag you're going to have this data doubler with 4 screws. That's kind of obvious where they go. So we've got the SSD, data doubler, looking for a screwdriver, small screwdriver, 4 screws. Just going to dump those out on the towel here. This is kind of obvious how it goes in because there are only screw holes on one side here, so it really can't go this way. It has to go this way. It looks kind of funny though because there's a cutout and the wire actually comes out over here. So if I remember right, last time I had to bend this a little bit. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stick the cable in because it might be kind of hard to insert ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and install this in the drive. This is fairly obvious the way this goes in. Just going to gently push this in. You can see how it kind of wants to interfere here a little bit, so it's a little bit easier to go ahead and put this on first. Then the next step is obviously just to put the screws in. Maybe this one will be more successful, which is the 00. So I'm having to squeeze this a little bit just to get these to kind of line up. First one's probably the most difficult one. I'm going to loose start it. Note these holes kind of line up, but because of the cable and stuff, they seem a little bit stubborn at first. You're having to flex the cable a little bit, which I don't like that so much. I've seen a better bracket design, but I like OWC. So I've got this in. We're going to have to bend this up a little bit later. Okay, so now I'm going to swap the SSD in his bracket for the DVD. I'm going to turn the video off for a minute because it's pretty easy to do. Okay, so I got the DVD drive separated from the bracket. The temp sensor was a little bit harder to get off. The foam came off very easily. I used a very small screwdriver to kind of pry my way around the bracket, so I felt like it might crack. When I pulled the screws out, the drive wanted to rotate up this way a little bit. There's some tiny releases on the back side. If you just put a tiny screwdriver in there and pull, or just tip it a little bit, they'll come right out. So just take note of that when you're getting the drive out. So came out pretty easily. Go gentle on the temp sensor. On this side where you can see the internals, there are two little releases right here. Put a little screwdriver in there and just gently push down on these locking tabs. There are actually some on this back side, but or on this side also, right here. But if you just try to lift a tiny bit, push these in, it'll come right out. So the rest of it's, I believe, pretty easy. I've got the okay, so one mistake I made the first time, and it confused me only because the connector on the original DVD drive is over here. Okay, the connector on the SSD is in a different spot. This cable gets you to the same place, so I was using that as a reference to where to put the temperature sensor. The temp sensor goes on the bottom along with this little pad. So they're stuck on. The thing's going to flip over and go on the drive. One thing to note also, since the connector's over here normally, you can see this wire is kind of big and bulky. So one thing you're going to have to do is kind of squeeze this down, bend these wires a little bit and get them into place so this connector right over here is kind of back in its original place. So I'm going to set this in. Then I'll zoom in a little bit. First I'm going to put these two fasteners in so this thing's not moving around. So I'm back with a small wire tie. So I'm just going to wrap it around here. Use it to kind of keep this cable squeezed together so it won't try to go back to its original state and get in the way. So I'm just going to kind of squeeze this with my hands, pinch this together just a little bit. I'll rotate that down. So now this thing's kind of held in place. I don't think it's going anywhere. I'm going to again clip off the excess. Got this package down, it's bolted in, so now all we have to do is plug the sensor back up, which I can see is a little bit tight now that I've installed the temp sensor on the SSD, so just keep that in mind. You gotta have enough room for yourself. I'm going to put another piece of tape down here, like the original one. Now, the one thing you have to be careful of, there's a fan output here, so you obviously do not want to install tape over top of that. That would not be good. Okay, so I've got my wire tied down in. I ran my temp sensor back in, plugged it in, white wire on the left. I used a small piece of like Scotch tape here just to keep this wire down. It was routed this way. It's a little bit shorter due to where I mounted the temp sensor on the drive. So I just made another routing, but I made sure it's not getting in the way of this fan opening here. that I believe cools the hard drive when it needs to. So we're ready to put the LCD back on. Everything's in place, connectors are in place. I'm going to try to not get my fingers all over the LCD panel. I'm going to watch the wire at the top. So it looks like it's kind of in place. So the next thing I need to do is put this connector in. So the only thing that worries me about this is I've got to kind of hold this and do this one-handed. I think it's got to get solid contact here. I'm going to give it one more push. I think it's in. Now, I almost got mixed up here, but if you look really carefully, it says LCD temp, which is nice that it's marked. So I am going to plug this back in. So I've got the LCD temp sensor in, got this connector in. I'm going to take this Mylar tape and kind of put it back in place. So we should be good. I'm going to kind of watch this as it goes down. I don't think there's anything super special about it. I'm going to kind of look at this connector as I come down. Make sure everything feels like it's dropping into place. Feels good. I'm going to push this right back in. Okay, everything looks good. So now I'm just going to put the LCD screws in, then I'm going to flip this up and brush it off. Okay, so now we're going to put the LCD bezel back on. I put the LCD in, tighten the screws, no big deal. So if I remember, this part kind of started out like this, the bottom. Then it's got to slide up a little bit. I can kind of see where it goes. Okay, now it popped on. I've got to connect this next. So I'm going to do that. And last time I kind of rotated this thing around just so I could get to it a little bit easier. Okay, so now we're going to plug in the microphone. Luckily this will only go one way because I don't remember how it came out. That popped in. I'm going to try to slide this up. You got to be careful not to pinch this microphone wire. So it looks like that kind of tucks down in there. What I'm going to do is just take a little guide. Great, I just touched the LCD. Try to get this tucked in here. Yeah, there we go. And that's down in. So now I can put some of the LCD screws in. So remember, the short ones are unmarked. So I'm going to put a couple of those in. Just the T8. So I'm just going to kind of go loosely on these now. So I took the LCD, I used one of these brushes from a camera lens. I used some lens cleaner where I touched it with my finger. I got it pretty clean. I got all the dust off. There's usually some dust anyway. I've kind of done the same to this. It's very hard to see this thing though because it's not black. So I'm just going to put this in and hopefully rotate it forward. It looks like it went right in the right spot. Okay, you can see how it comes on and off. Now I'm just going to clean the screen and see if this thing will boot. So I'll set some directions up here in the video. So I'm going to go through a multi-step process. The idea is we're going to boot this machine from another Mac's hard drive. We're going to create a thing called a Fusion Drive. Then we're going to boot from a USB that I can install Mavericks with. So I'm going to install the OS from this, and then I'm going to restore the whole computer the way it was from a Time Machine. Okay, so I put this back together. I'm just going to boot it on the bench here. Boot it up. First thing it says is the disk you inserted was not readable by this computer. Do you want to initialize? I think I'm going to put ignore. I was already in disk utility. Now I don't expect you to see all the detail on the screen here. If I did, I'd do a screen recording. But anyway, I see that there's an OWC 240 gig hard drive here. I think I'm in disk utility. I'm going to go into partition. Let's see here. I'm going to tell it it's one partition. I'm not going to give it a name right now. Mac OS Extended Journal. I'm going to hit options. It's GUID partition table. I'm going to leave that checked. I'm going to hit OK. I'm just going to hit apply. And it's going to say, are you sure you want to partition this? I'm going to tell it yes. So I think this should happen pretty quickly. So the good thing is it saw the drive. It's partitioned it right now. It's untitled. One thing I'm going to do is go into about this Mac, say more info, system report, and then I'm going to look on my SATA tab here, and I see my hard drive here. I should be able to check the link speed, hopefully. See, it says link speed 3 gigabits, negotiated link speed 3 gigabits. So I'm good there. Everything looks good. So now, I know the drive's working. It's in here. I'm going to turn this off. Just shut it down. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start this MacBook Pro beside me in target disk mode. So what that means is I'm just going to hold the T down. Well, first of all, I'm going to shut it off. Okay, so I've shut down this MacBook Pro. I'm going to start it in target disk mode. I've got a FireWire 800 cable connected from this MacBook Pro to this 24-inch iMac. I'm going to hold down T, not Command T, just T. I'm going to turn the power on. I'm just going to hold this down, and it's already gone into target disk mode, so you see a FireWire symbol on the screen. So now what I want to do is boot this computer off the hard drive in there. So what I'm going to do is hold down Option. I'm going to turn the power button on. When I do that, it's going to come up with a choice of what to boot from, the internal drive or another bootable drive, which is on that machine over there. So here are my choices. I've got the Mac hard drive in here, its recovery partition, the Mac hard drive on that, which is the FireWire symbol, or its recovery partition. So what I'm going to do is just arrow over to the Mac hard drive in that one, hit return. Now I'm going to boot off that machine. It's going to take a couple minutes, but the hard drive in this MacBook Pro is running this machine now. That's going to allow me to do is do some work on the drives that are resonant or mounted in this computer, which is a 600 gigabyte conventional hard drive and now the 240 gigabyte SSD. Okay, so I don't expect you to follow on the screen. I'm going to give you a URL to an article on how to do the Fusion Drive. But anyway, what you're going to basically do here is you need to go into the terminal. So I clicked on Launchpad. Launchpad, go into where it says Other, Terminal. So I'm in the terminal. I'm going to type disk util list. So what it's going to do, and you'll see this when you do it yourself, it's got a list of the drives here. So I see the 240 gigabyte SSD, I see the 640 drive that's resident in this machine, and the third one called disk 2 is the 750 gigabyte drive in the MacBook Pro. So now I know that I want to work with disk 0 and disk 1. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is create the Fusion drive. So it's going to destroy everything that's on this drive right now. So I'm going to go disk util. I have to look at this. Core storage. And I believe the command is create. So disk util core storage create. I'm going to call it my Fusion drive. Is like a logical drive group. And then I'm going to list the disk out here. So I'm going to go /dev/disk 0 and then space /dev disk 1. So I think I've got everything right. Okay, so I'm going to push the button here and hopefully everything's going to go right. Now the reason I did this by booting off the MacBook Pro 2, when I tried this on the drives that are resident in there, the recovery partition, it wouldn't allow me to do it. So here we go. This supposedly is creating the Fusion drive, or the logical volume group. Now just one other comment, there's a good article that I will put URL to in this video. Please read that. The person that wrote it knows much more about this than I do. I'm just kind of giving you an overview of what's going on. So it created the logical drive. Okay, so I've typed in the command here. It's disk util core storage create volume. I use this volume group identification number here, JHFS plus, which is the format type. Then Macintosh hard drive is what I'm going to call it, in quotes, 100%. Hit enter. It's formatting it. It says it's finished. So I should have a drive called the Macintosh hard drive that is a combination of the SSD and the 640 spinning drive. So now my task is I want to get the OS installed back on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boot this computer off this USB drive, which will allow me to install Mavericks on this, and then I'm going to use the time machine to restore everything. Okay, so I've plugged the bootable USB in on the back side. Going to hold down Option, turn this on, and it should come up with a choice that says I can boot off this USB drive. Then I'm going to install Mavericks. So I've booted this up. It asked me to turn on the mouse. I did. It's ready to install the OS. So it's asking me where, and I see that I've got a what looks like the Macintosh hard drive. It's 871 gigs, which is a combination of the 640 or 620 drive that was in there and this 250 or 240 SSD that I combined into a Fusion drive. So I'm going to select that, hit install, and now it should start to install the OS. Okay, so I installed the OS, I booted. I didn't transfer the information back right away, so I wanted to update to 10.9.1 first. I used a alternate kind of ID to sign in. You don't want to use your ID to sign in because when you restore it you'll have two and that will be a problem. So just use anything for right now, something other than your real ID, then you can delete it later. So I'm going to see what's in the updates. There's a few in here. I'm going to say update all. And we're going to download and restart. Let that go. When this is done, then I'm going to restore from the time machine. Okay, so where I'm at right now, I rebooted after I got updated 10.9.1. I went in to use Migration Assistant. I plugged in the external hard drive that has the backup for this machine in. What was odd, the first time I selected the drive, for some reason it only restored 157 kilobytes of nothing. I was a little bit worried. I just went in, repeated, selected the same drive, then it showed me all the applications, all the user, all the data that I wanted to really restore, and I just said continue and it's going. So according to this, it's going to be an hour and 45 minutes to get the thing restored back to the way I had it. So at the end of the day I'll have a Fusion drive that's going to boot really fast, and we'll take a look at that when we're done, and all my data back the way it was. Hopefully this was helpful. Okay, so this is the final chapter here on this install. A couple things that I did wrong. One is I left two screws out of this connector and had to go back in and put them back in. I didn't have the whole machine together. I touched the LCD. I didn't particularly like that, and I had the temp sensor on the wrong side of the solid state drive, so I had to redo that a little bit. None of these things I had to go back too far. I just had to repeat a couple steps. Everything worked fine. Fusion drive's in, the OS is loaded, and we're going to boot it up one more time here on the bench. So this is a 2009. It's not a particularly fast iMac in today's terms, but you'll see here that from the time you see the Apple pop on the screen, it boots up fairly quickly for a 2009 machine, and I didn't have to worry about separating things like apps for the SSD and data files on the spinning drive because it was all managed by the OS. So it's pretty fast to boot. I'm pretty happy with it. Apps start very quickly now, so I think it's going to be a great machine for a few more years. Hope this is informative, and don't forget to watch the URL that shows you how to create the Fusion drive. It's very good. Thank you.